It's Friday night. The city lights blur outside the restaurant window. You're laughing with friends, the taste of a $25 cocktail still on your tongue. The bill arrives, and you casually tap your card, splitting it 4 ways. It's only $80. You tell yourself you deserve it after a long week. On Sunday, you grab a $7 latte and browse online, adding a few small things to your cart. Another $60 gone. This feels normal. It feels like success. But what if I told you this exact routine, this comfortable weekly cycle, is a silent killer? It's not the one-off splurge or the big vacation. It's the slow, methodical erosion of your future wealth, happening every single week, right under your nose. And the most dangerous part? You probably don't even realize it's happening until it's far too late. Welcome to Hope to Wealth. We believe that the most powerful financial lessons come from real, human stories. Today, we're diving into one of the most insidious traps in modern life, a trap that keeps good, hard-working people from ever building real, lasting wealth. It's not about stock market crashes or bad investments. It's about something far more common and far more dangerous: the slow leak of your financial potential through seemingly harmless weekly habits. We're going to follow the story of a man named Mark, someone who, on the surface, had it all: a great job, a nice apartment, an active social life. But underneath, a quiet panic was growing, fueled by a financial reality he refused to face. His journey from denial to discovery will reveal the exact mindset and habits that are silently sabotaging millions. This isn't just a story, it's a mirror. By the end of this video, you'll be able to see your own habits reflected in his, and more importantly, you'll have a clear blueprint to plug the leaks and start building the future you truly deserve. If you're ready to confront the truth and transform your financial life, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap the like icon. You won't want to miss this. Act 1. The Gilded Cage of Good Income. Let's meet Mark. At 32, he was the picture of young professional success. He was a senior marketing manager at a growing tech firm, pulling in a salary well into the 6 figures. He lived in a sleek, modern apartment in a trendy part of the city, the kind with floor-to-ceiling windows and a gym you actually wanted to use. His car was a late-model German sedan, leased, of course, but it projected the right image. To his friends, his family, and his colleagues, Mark was winning. He was confident, articulate, and always dressed impeccably. He was the guy who always knew the best new restaurant, the coolest cocktail bar, the must-see weekend getaway. His life, curated carefully for social media and casual conversation, was one of effortless abundance. But what no one saw was the 3 a.m. wake-up calls, his heart pounding with a nameless dread. No one saw the way his stomach clenched when he swiped his credit card for a large purchase, a tiny voice whispering, "Can you really afford this?" No one knew that the confident smile was a mask for a deep, gnawing anxiety about money. Mark was trapped in a gilded cage he had built for himself. His high income wasn't building freedom. It was merely funding a more expensive prison. His weekly routine was a masterclass in this illusion. The week started with a promise to be good. He'd make coffee at home, pack a lunch. But by Wednesday, the resolve would crumble. A stressful meeting meant he deserved a $15 gourmet sandwich for lunch. Thursday night was for networking, which translated to 2 or 3 expensive craft beers with colleagues. And then came the weekend, the main event in his high-consumption lifestyle. Friday was always dinner out with friends, a bill that rarely came in under $100 per person after drinks and tip. Saturday was for brunch, another 40, followed by some retail therapy, a new shirt, a cool gadget, nothing extravagant on its own, but it all added up. Saturday night might be a concert or another expensive bar. Sunday was for recovery, which meant ordering in food, often twice, because cooking felt like too much effort. This wasn't a splurge. This was his baseline. It was the life he felt he was supposed to be living. His income, which seemed so large on paper, was vaporized within days of hitting his bank account. He was living a life dictated by lifestyle inflation, where every raise he got was immediately absorbed by a higher standard of living. He wasn't getting richer, He was just getting better at spending. The silent killer wasn't a single monster. It was 1,000 tiny papercuts, each one administered by his own hand, justified by phrases like, "You only live once, I work hard for this, and it's just this once." The problem was, just this once was happening 4 or 5 times a week, every week. He was running faster and faster on a financial hamster wheel, and the gnawing anxiety was the sound of the axle starting to break. Act 2. The unraveling. The illusion of wealth is fragile. All it takes is one unexpected shove from reality to make the whole thing shatter. For Mark, that shove came on a Tuesday afternoon in the form of a strange clunking sound from his leased sedan. He pulled over, his heart sinking. A tow truck, a diagnosis from a mechanic with a grim face, and a verdict. A transmission issue not fully covered by the warranty. The bill would be $2,800. For someone earning what Mark earned, this should have been an annoyance, an inconvenience. For Mark, it was a catastrophe. He went home that night and did something he hadn't done in years. He logged into his online banking and looked at the numbers. Really looked. His checking account a week before his next paycheck held a terrifyingly low $457. His savings account, the one he was supposed to be contributing to automatically, it had $150. He had forgotten to restart the automatic transfers after changing banks a year ago. It was a stupid, careless mistake, but the result was devastating. His entire net worth, outside of a small 401k he tried not to think about, was less than $2,000. He was 32 years old, earning over $100,000 a year, and he was essentially broke. The panic that had been a low hum in the background of his life was now a screaming siren. He pulled out his credit card statements. The numbers swam before his eyes. Thousands of dollars spent on what? Restaurants, bars, clothes, Amazon purchases he barely remembered making. It was a blur of consumption. He had nothing to show for it but a closet full of clothes he rarely wore and a vague memory of good meals. The $2,800 repair bill might as well have been $28,000. He'd have to put it on a credit card, adding to the balance he was already struggling to pay down. The interest alone was a constant drain, another invisible leak in his financial ship. That night, Mark didn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his expensive apartment, the city lights outside no longer looking beautiful, but mocking. They were a symbol of the life he was pretending to live. The truth was, he wasn't a man of wealth and success. He was a man in debt, living paycheck to paycheck, one minor emergency away from total collapse. The Gilded Cage suddenly felt very cold and very small. The weekly habits, the dinners, the drinks, the casual spending, they no longer seemed like rewards. They seemed like the very bars of his prison. The shock was profound. It was a physical feeling, a cold weight in his gut. The life he had so carefully constructed was a house of cards, and the wind was picking up. He had a choice to make. Keep pretending and hope for the best, or finally, painfully, face the truth. If Mark's story is resonating with you, if you've ever felt that disconnect between your income and your savings, do us a favor and hit that like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Hope to Wealth for more stories that can change your financial life. Act 3. The Painful Audit. The weekend after the car incident was a blur of caffeine and spreadsheets. Mark made a decision. He was done with the anxiety, done with the denial. He was going to perform a full, unflinching audit of his financial life. He armed himself with his bank statements, credit card bills, and every digital receipt he could find from the last 90 days. He was going to track every single dollar. He opened a new spreadsheet, his hands trembling slightly. He created simple categories: housing, car, groceries, restaurants, bars, subscriptions, shopping, entertainment, and a terrifyingly vague one he labeled MISC. At first, it was just data entry. But as the hours wore on, a sickening picture began to emerge. It wasn't one big, glaring expense that was sinking him. It was a relentless onslaught of small, seemingly insignificant purchases. The daily $6 coffee he grabbed on his way to work, over $350 in 3 months. The lunches out when he was too busy to pack one, almost $1,000. The category for restaurants, bars was a bloodbath. Friday and Saturday nights alone accounted for over $2,500. He saw the Ubers, the late-night pizza orders, the rounds of drinks he'd bought for friends. Each transaction was a ghost of a decision made without thought. But the subscriptions category was the one that truly shocked him. He found charges for streaming services he hadn't used in months, a free trial for a productivity app that had converted to a $20 monthly fee, a digital magazine subscription he'd completely forgotten about. It was over $80 a month in pure waste, money being siphoned directly from his account without him even noticing. His Amazon purchase history read like the diary of a man with no impulse control. A $30 phone case, a $50 kitchen gadget he used once, a $120 pair of sneakers because they were on sale. None of these felt like major purchases at the time. He had the money in his checking account, so he clicked Buy Now. But laid out on the spreadsheet, these small, impulsive buys added up to over $2,500 in 90 days. It was death by 1,000 cuts. The spreadsheet was a brutal, objective mirror, and it reflected a person he didn't want to be. A person who was careless, impulsive, and financially irresponsible. He saw that for every dollar he spent on something meaningful, he was spending 3 on things that brought him fleeting pleasure and lasting regret. The total was staggering. After his fixed costs like rent and car payments, he had spent nearly 70% of his discretionary income on things that vanished into thin air. His savings rate wasn't just low, it was negative some months as his credit card balance crept higher. There was no single villain in this story. The killer wasn't a mortgage or a student loan. The killer was the relentless drip, drip, drip of his weekly habits. The latte, the lunch, the Uber Eats, the forgotten subscription, the I deserve it dinner. Together, they formed a tidal wave that was drowning his financial future. Act 4. Naming the killer, the justification mindset. As Mark stared at the damning evidence on his spreadsheet, he had a profound realization. The problem wasn't just the spending itself. The root of the issue, the true silent killer of his wealth, was the mindset that enabled it. It was the constant stream of justifications he fed himself to make the spending feel okay. He started listing them out, and it was like writing down a secret, shameful language he had been speaking to himself for years. I work hard, I deserve a treat. This was his go-to for everything from an expensive dinner to a new piece of tech. He had conflated rewarding himself with spending money, creating a dangerous link between his professional effort and financial carelessness. He was rewarding his hard work by sabotaging the very future that work was supposed to build. It's only $10. This was the lie of insignificance. He minimized the cost of small purchases, failing to see their cumulative power. $10 3 times a week is over $1,500 a year. Invested, that $1,500 could become tens of thousands over his lifetime. He was trading a future of financial freedom for a present of trivial conveniences. Everyone else is doing it. The social pressure was immense. When his friends wanted to go to a pricey new restaurant, saying no felt awkward. It felt like he was being cheap or antisocial. He was spending money he didn't have to maintain an image for people who were likely in the same financial boat, all of them silently sinking together. YOLO, you only live once. This was perhaps the most insidious justification of all. It positioned smart financial decisions as boring and restrictive, and impulsive spending as exciting and life-affirming. He was using the preciousness of his one life as an excuse to not plan for it, ensuring that his later years would be filled with financial stress rather than the freedom he craved. This justification mindset was a psychological trap. Each small purchase provided a tiny hit of dopamine, a fleeting sense of pleasure or relief from stress. His brain had become addicted to these little rewards, and his justifications were the excuses his rational mind created to allow the addiction to continue. It wasn't about the coffee. It was about the ritual and the brief escape from his desk. It wasn't about the new shirt. It was about the momentary thrill of acquisition. Mark realized he'd been using spending as a tool for everything except its intended purpose. He used it to manage stress, to combat boredom, to project an image, and to feel a sense of belonging. He was trying to fill an emotional void with material things, and it was a fundamentally losing strategy. The void remained, and now it was accompanied by a mountain of debt and anxiety. The silent killer wasn't just a habit, it was a deeply ingrained belief system. And to change his financial future, he wouldn't just have to change his actions, he would have to fundamentally rewire his brain. If you recognize any of these justifications in your own life, let us know in the comments which one hits closest to home. And please, take a moment to subscribe and click the like button to help this message reach more people who need to hear it. Act 5. Forging a new weapon, the wealth-building plan. Mark knew that a traditional restrictive budget was doomed to fail. He had tried them before. They felt like a diet of bread and water, miserable and unsustainable. The moment he felt deprived, his old justification mindset would kick in, and he'd rebel by overspending. He needed a different approach. He needed to shift his focus from what he was giving up to what he was building. So he didn't create a budget. He created a wealth-building plan. This was a crucial psychological shift. The goal wasn't to restrict, it was to direct. It was an offensive strategy, not a defensive one. The very first rule of his new plan was radical for him. Pay yourself first. But he took it a step further. He decided to make saving and investing the most important bills he paid each month. Before his rent was due, before his car payment, before he even bought groceries, a portion of his paycheck would be automatically moved out of his sight. He opened 2 new accounts at a different bank to create friction. One was a high-yield savings account for his emergency fund. His first goal was to get that $2,800 car repair money back and then build it to 6 months of living expenses. The second was a brokerage account for long-term investing. He set up automatic transfers for the day after his paycheck hit. He started small, committing to saving and investing 15% of his gross income. It felt like a huge chunk, but his audit had shown him where the money could come from. The money he was spending on forgotten subscriptions, impulse buys, and overpriced dinners was now being rerouted to build his future. The beauty of automation was that it removed willpower from the equation. He no longer had to decide to save. It just happened. The money was gone from his checking account before he had a chance to spend it on something fleeting. The rest of his paycheck was for him to manage. But now, he was working with a smaller, more realistic amount. This forced him to be intentional. He created a zero-based budget for his remaining funds. Every dollar was given a job. He allocated specific amounts for groceries, gas, utilities, and debt repayment. He also created a category he called guilt-free spending. This was a fixed amount of money each month he could spend on whatever he wanted. Restaurants, a new gadget, coffee, without an ounce of guilt. This was key. It prevented the feeling of deprivation. He could still enjoy life, but within a framework that protected his long-term goals. His plan wasn't about saying no to everything. It was about saying a powerful yes to financial freedom, and then aligning his spending with that yes. It transformed money from a source of anxiety into a tool for building the life he actually wanted, not the one he thought he was supposed to show off. Act 6. Re-engineering the week. With his wealth-building plan in place, Mark faced the next great challenge, changing the daily and weekly habits that had led to the disaster in the first place. He knew that simply willing himself to stop spending wouldn't work. He had to proactively replace his old expensive habits with new, fulfilling, and less costly ones. He called this process re-engineering his week. He started with the biggest offender, food and drink. Instead of defaulting to expensive dinners out, he made a conscious effort to rediscover the joy of cooking. He subscribed to a meal kit service for a few weeks to learn new recipes and build his confidence. Soon, he was making meals that were healthier, cheaper, and often more delicious than what he could get at a restaurant. He started hosting a monthly potluck dinner for his friends instead of meeting them out. The connection was deeper, the conversations were better, and everyone saved money. His friends loved it. It turned out they were feeling the same financial pressure he was. The daily coffee habit was next. He invested $100 in a quality coffee maker and a grinder. He started buying beans from a local roaster. His morning ritual transformed from a rushed, expensive transaction to a mindful, enjoyable experience. The coffee was better, and he was saving over $100 a year. He tackled his impulse shopping by creating a 72-hour rule. Anytime he felt the urge to buy a non-essential item over $50, he would put it in an online cart or add it to a list, but he was forbidden from buying it for 72 hours. More often than not, after 3 days, the intense need for the item had vanished. It was just an impulse, a fleeting desire, not a true want. He replaced his aimless weekend retail therapy with intentional activities. He got a library card and rediscovered his love of reading. He researched hiking trails near his city and started spending his Saturdays in nature, which did more for his stress than any shopping spree ever could. He started volunteering at a local animal shelter on Sunday mornings. These activities weren't just cheaper, they were genuinely more fulfilling. They filled the emotional void that he had previously tried to plug with consumption. He was building a richer life, not just a richer bank account. This process wasn't about deprivation, it was about intentionality. It was about consciously choosing to spend his two most valuable resources, his time and his money, on things that brought him lasting joy and moved him closer to his goals, rather than mindlessly trading them for fleeting pleasures. If you're getting value from Mark's transformation, please support the channel by hitting that subscribe button and giving this video a like. Your support allows us to keep creating stories that empower people. Act 7. The unstoppable power of compounding. 6 months passed, then a year. Mark's life looked very different, but not in the ways he had feared. He wasn't a hermit. He still went out with friends. But now it was more deliberate. Maybe one nice dinner a month, not 3 a week. He still bought new things, but they were things he truly needed or valued, purchased after careful consideration, not on a whim. The biggest change was internal. The 3 a.m. panic attacks were gone. The knot of anxiety in his stomach had been replaced by a quiet confidence. He found a new kind of pleasure, not in spending, but in watching his numbers grow. Every month, he would log into his accounts. His emergency fund was now fully funded, a fortress of cash that gave him an incredible sense of security. He knew that if his car broke down again, or if he lost his job, he would be okay. This feeling was worth more than any cocktail or gadget. But the most exciting part was watching his investment account. It was the first time in his life he had made his money work for him. He was invested in a simple, low-cost index fund that tracked the total stock market. He didn't try to pick stocks or time the market. He just kept adding money consistently, every 2 weeks, like clockwork. He started to understand the true magic of wealth building, the power of compound interest. He ran the numbers on a compound interest calculator, and the results blew his mind. He saw how the $1,250 he was now investing every month, money that he used to squander without a second thought, could grow. In 10 years, it could be over $200,000. In 20 years, it could be over $650,000. And in 30 years, it could be worth nearly $1.5 million. This wasn't some get-rich-quick fantasy. This was simple math. It was the result of discipline, consistency, and time. He realized that building wealth wasn't about having one brilliant idea or getting lucky with a stock pick. It was about making thousands of small, good decisions over a long period. It was about winning the war of attrition against his own worst impulses. The weekly habits that had been the silent killer of his wealth were now replaced by weekly habits that were the silent builder of his wealth. The automatic transfers, the mindful spending, the consistent investing. Each action was a brick, and he was slowly, patiently building a fortress of financial freedom. He was no longer just surviving, he was thriving. The hope he had lost was returning, stronger and more resilient than ever before, because this time, It was built on a foundation of reality, not illusion. Act 8. Redefining Wealth. 2 years after that fateful car repair bill, Mark's life was unrecognizable, though his job, his apartment, and his friends were mostly the same. The change was on a much deeper level. One evening, he was having a simple home-cooked dinner with a friend who was complaining about being broke despite a recent promotion. Mark listened patiently as his friend talked about the pressure to upgrade his car, to go on an expensive vacation, to keep up with the lifestyle he felt he was supposed to have. Mark saw his old self in his friend's words, the same anxiety, the same justifications, the same gilded cage. In that moment, Mark understood his new definition of wealth. It had nothing to do with the car he drove or the price tag on his clothes. It wasn't about impressing other people. True wealth, he realized, was control. It was the control over his time. It was the freedom from the anxiety that comes from living on the edge. It was the power to make decisions based on his values, not his financial limitations. It was knowing that he could walk away from a job he hated, that he could handle a medical emergency, that he could afford to be generous to the people and causes he cared about. It was security. It was peace of mind. It was freedom. The weekly habits that had once been his masters were now his servants. The money that had once caused him so much stress was now his most powerful tool for building a life of purpose. He hadn't just changed his spending, he had changed his entire relationship with money, and in doing so, he had changed his relationship with himself. He was no longer pretending to be successful. He was quietly, confidently building a life of authentic wealth, one intentional week at a time. Mark's story is a powerful reminder that the biggest threats to our financial future are often not the dramatic events, but the quiet, everyday choices we make. His journey shows that it is never too late to face the truth, to change your habits, and to start building a life of true freedom and hope. This is a journey worth taking. And if Mark's story has inspired you, your support for the channel is incredibly important. One last time, please consider subscribing to Hope to Wealth and liking this video. It helps us continue our mission. Mark's journey from a high-earning, high-spending professional riddled with anxiety to a calm, confident wealth builder is a story that holds a lesson for every one of us. He discovered that the most dangerous threat to his financial future wasn't a lack of income, but a lack of intention. The silent killer was a collection of small, unexamined weekly habits, fueled by a mindset of justification and social pressure. By performing a painful but necessary financial audit, he was able to identify the leaks. By creating a wealth-building plan instead of a restrictive budget, he shifted his focus from deprivation to aspiration. And by re-engineering his week with fulfilling, low-cost habits, he built a life that was not only more affordable, but genuinely richer. His story proves that true wealth isn't about what you show, but what you build. It's about security, control, and peace of mind. I challenge you to take the first step Mark took. Spend one weekend auditing your last 90 days of spending. Face the numbers without judgment. What story do they tell? What is your silent killer? If this story resonated with you, please help us spread the message. Hit that like button, subscribe to Hope to Wealth if you haven't already, and share this video with someone you think needs to hear it. And most importantly, leave a comment below. What is one weekly habit you're going to change starting today? Let's build this community of hope and wealth together. Thank you for watching.